Now that we've got our camera icon drawn, let's set it up so that it's a little bit easier to use. Now, knowing what we already know, we could group those two pieces together. Remember, we have the outside of the camera and the inside as two separate shapes. But let's try out something that's going to be a little bit better. What we want to do is make this into what's called a symbol. Now, it's pretty easy to make a symbol. Let's just select both pieces of the camera. I'm just going to drag a marquee around both pieces, and there we've got them selected. I'll go up to Modify, and I'm going to convert those selections into a symbol. For future reference, notice that the keyboard shortcut for this is F8. And that's kind of important because we're probably going to be making a lot of these symbols. They're very important to Flash production. I'll select Convert to Symbol, and as you can see, we get a dialog box that allows us to give this symbol a name, choose a type, and set up a registration or an origin point for the symbol. Let's just call this one Camera Icon. And I'm going to leave it as Movie Clip. But if we pull down this selector, we can see that we have two other types available to us that we'll try out later, the button and the graphic symbol. Movie clips end up being the most important and most often used symbol of this group, so we're going to stick with that one for starters. Now, the registration point is just an origin point for that item. It's very typical to leave that in the upper left-hand corner, and it'll basically be placed in a bounding box right around the graphics that you've selected. You can move this registration point around by selecting any one of the other boxes. For our camera icon, I'm going to set the registration point in the center, and I'll do that by just clicking the center box in the registration selection. Let's click OK and see what we've got. Now, as you can see, our camera icon looks a little bit like a group. We've got a blue bounding box around it, and let me just zoom in so we can see some of the other details. I'll use Command plus on the Mac here, or you can use Control plus on the PC, and as you can see, it centers it up in the screen, and I'll do it one more time. Now, you can see the bounding box around the outside of my camera, and it looks a little bit like a group. It's going to act like a group as well. If we want to make any changes to the camera, you'll notice I'm not seeing that cursor that indicates that I can modify the shape of the camera now. In order to edit the camera icon, I'll do the same thing I would if it was a group, and that is double-click. I'll just double-click right here on the camera icon, and this time you'll see in the status bar it indicates that I'm working on a camera icon, not a group. I have a little different graphic for this symbol as well. And as we can see on our stage, my camera icon is opened up, those shapes are available, and I could start modifying those shapes if I wanted to by deselecting and pulling on the edges. We can also see that registration point that we set up when we made the symbol, right there in the center. It'll always show up as a little plus sign, and it simply means the center of that area. To get back to scene 1, I do the same thing we would with the group. I'll click on scene 1, or I'll click on the back arrow. Now, what's different about a symbol? Well, the most important thing is where the symbol is actually stored. In this case, let's go over and look at the library. You can see the camera icon has been added to the library items, and what that means is we have a reusable item. We can use this camera icon in our presentation as many times as we want to. Just like when we were working with the photo montage JPEG, if I wanted another camera icon, I simply go into the library, grab a hold of the icon, and pull it on out. And you can see I've got a second copy of my camera. Now, we can always make a copy of a group, but very importantly, that's going to make a complete copy of all the graphics in the group, and that would actually start to make our file size a lot bigger. By using symbols, we're not going to be saving 2 copies of our camera, we'll only have 1, but we could use 200 of them in our movie file, and it wouldn't make our movie any bigger. Now, since we don't need that second camera icon for our presentation, I'm just going to select it and hit delete. But I do want to take a closer look at editing these from the library. Now, if I zoom out just a little bit, that'll be Command minus on the Mac or Control minus on the PC, we can see a little bit more of our stage and the other items on our stage. When I double-click my camera, you can see that those items dim out, so that's indicating that they're not going to be editable, and it also indicates that they're not part of our symbol. Now, we call this editing in place, because we're editing the symbol in the place where we have it in the movie file. It keeps all those other elements in context so that we can see the relationship between the text, the pictures, and the icon that we're working on. Let me go back to scene 1, and let's go over to our library. because I wanted to show you that you can also edit your symbols straight out of the library. If I just double-click on the camera icon, you can see it pulls the camera icon up in its own window. And if we zoom way out, you can see that there's no stage here either. I'll zoom back in and pull this back into the center. We're just working on that icon kind of in a big blank area. And that's why we have a registration point in this one, so that we kind of have a grounding position. Now, if you ever need to move the registration point of a symbol, you don't really move the registration point itself. What you do is you move the graphics in relation to the registration point where it sits, because it's basically just that center of this big area that we're working in. Now let's go back to scene 1 and see what else we can do with a symbol. I mentioned that symbols are a lot more powerful than groups because they actually have a lot of extra settings. I've got my camera icon selected, and over in the property window, we have the normal position and size properties, but we've also got 3D position and view, color effect, displays, and filters. And many of these things are only applicable to symbols. A lot of times, I'll take a graphic or a piece of text that I have on my stage and make it into a symbol just to get some of these properties. Some of the more popular ones are under the color effect setting. So I'm going to click the triangle right next to that setting, and we'll see what we've got. Under Style, I can choose from any one of these styles. Let's try Tint first, and make a change to my graphic. Now what Tint will do is it will basically add a color, any color you choose, to the colors of your existing graphic. Since our camera icon is all white, we'll be tinting it very easily by just choosing any non-white color. I'll go up here and choose red, and you can see that red is being added to the white at a tint level of 50%. We can play with that slider to simply add more red. You can see it's getting more and more red there, or less red. Now, another color effect that's probably more popular than tint is alpha. And this is where we get to set the transparency level of anything that's in that symbol. You can see the default alpha is 100%, but if I pull that back, I'm getting a transparent camera icon. And we can see that even more pronounced if I just drag this over top of our picture. You can see that we've just got transparency built into that, and we can do that for anything that is a movie clip symbol. Let me pull that back up to 100 because I don't really want a transparent icon right now. And let's try out some of the other settings. Under Filters, we can go down here to the bottom and add a filter. And this will add any one of these effects shown to our symbol. So we could just quickly add a drop shadow, and each one of these effects has a whole bunch of different settings that allow us to control that effect. I can change blur amount, strength, and quality, but you can see that drop shadow dropped right in behind the graphic. It's even showing in the transparent areas inside the lens. Now, if you want to add additional filters, I can click this triangle to collapse the drop shadow, and we can simply just stack a whole bunch of filters up. I could add in a glow, for instance. The default is a red glow, and that looks kind of interesting around our camera, but not exactly what I wanted. So let me go up here and show you how to remove a filter. I'll just make sure I have my glow filter selected, go down to the trash can icon and click it, and you can see it gets removed from the stack.